Hey everybody, what is up? Welcome back to Funnel Trade. My patron Tim from New Zealand asked me, I'm thinking of opening a local hobby shop slash cafe as the margins here in New Zealand are insane. I'd also love to hear your thoughts on the analytical process you'd go through to assess the viability of this, as I think you mentioned in a previous video, it was something you were considering. And so I've actually thought about this for a couple of days, written down a bunch of notes, and I'm going to talk about a bunch of stuff. And so some of this is things that you need to consider. Others are questions that I don't have the answers to, questions that you, Tim, need to contemplate on your own. So, the first thing to really put into perspective here is New Zealand is about 1,000 miles from Australia, and Australia is about 5,000 miles from Southeast Asia. And so, it's kind of out there. And in terms of logistics and shipping and things like that, it's kind of the ass end of the earth. And, I'm sure there's some island chains out in the middle of the Pacific that are harder to get to, that have worse logistics systems and everything. But in terms of a country of, isn't it about 5 million people in New Zealand? In terms of that, it's about as bad as it gets for a country of that size. And from the East Coast to the West Coast of the United States is 2,800 miles. And so you're talking nearly twice that from Australia to Southeast Asia, and then another 1,000 miles from Australia to New Zealand. So you have to understand the isolation here and how that can affect the market. And so the first thing I would ask Tim is, when you say the margins are insane, we need to understand, why are they insane and what's insane about them? And can you quantify insane? And, a lot of businesses can fail with insane margins because either the margins turned out to not be so insane, or other aspects of the business like the fixed costs and things like that were too large that even with great margins, a business can fail. And so you need to really understand, why is it those margins are insane? Is it because of those logistics problems? Are they insane when you compare the prices for which, say, I sell to patrons in the US compared to what you can buy for at retail prices in New Zealand? And so would the whole business be predicated on the idea that someone in the US sends you product, or somehow else you can get a lot of product shipped economically from the US to New Zealand? Or are there opportunities even if you're buying at distributor prices in New Zealand? So you would need to understand, what are your distributor prices there? What are your opportunities for buying stuff there? In the US, we're super spoiled. A lot of cards are manufactured here in the US to start with. The companies are based here in the US. The biggest market is the US, and the best marketplaces are in the US. And so, we have these situations where the major distributors in the US, they run retail channels on eBay. Well, you can get a 3 1/3% cashback eBay credit card. They're going to be selling just a few dollars over what they sell to retail card stores to start with. And so in some cases, you can get below wholesale prices buying through eBay in the US. And we're super spoiled here. So you need to understand, do those kind of opportunities exist at all in New Zealand? And how can you maintain the insanity of those margins? So, do you have a relationship where someone could provide you those opportunities? If you're seeing what we buy for in the US and you're thinking, man, if I could get those cards shipped to New Zealand at some kind of economical rate, well, do you have a relationship? And does that relationship involve either the level of trust that you need for you and the counterparty to trust each other with large amounts of money? Or if not, do you have access to the kind of credit you would need in order to obtain a pallet of product and have it shipped over, and have that take weeks to come sea freight, and then you to get it and start selling it and being able to pay the money back? And so there's all kinds of capital requirements that come along with that. Do you have experience running any business? And the reason for that question is we have stuff like business banking, accounting, deductions, expenses, taxes, inventory management, just all the normal kind of boring business stuff you have to do. And I've been really lucky. I've been running Final Trade for 3.5 years now out of a bedroom. And, I have very, very minimal overhead expenses for that. It's almost zero as the overhead expense. And so it's given me a lot of low pressure, easy time to learn how to deal with things like tax compliance, regulation, how to actually fill out and file the taxes, do all the expenses and the deductions correctly, do it optimally, how to handle inventory. It's allowed me to grow the business now to over six-figure revenue on a yearly basis and confront those growing pains one at a time with very low pressure. I don't have employees. I don't have a physical retail space. I don't have a bunch of recurring bills for the business that I have absolutely got to pay for. And at the same time, I'm trying to climb the learning curve of running a business. So if you already have a bunch of experience running a business, then you've learned a lot of those lessons. Additionally, my dad was a small businessman who owned a business from 1991 to 2020. And so almost 30 years he ran his own business. And that's been a very great asset to have when I have some question about, how do you handle this expense, or how do you file this form with the government, or how do you do this kind of accounting or whatever. He's always been able to help me with those questions. So, do you have more experienced people you can fall back on, and what's your experience? Do you have the means to keep eating while the store struggles for a couple of years? And this, again, I'll mention my dad. In the 1980s, he worked for Quick Copy in franchise support. And so it was basically the division of the company that would interface with the franchisees and help them with their Quick Copy locations that they ran. And he's told me that one of the things they required when a new potential franchisee came to them to try to purchase a franchise was that they would have to show that they had 2 years of family expenses saved as cash. And yeah, that's pretty dramatic, but the point is, when you open a store, you're going to have a whole new learning curve to climb that you never imagined before. If I ever open a store, I'll have a whole new learning curve to climb that I can't imagine right now. And so, do you have money on hand to continue eating? If you have 6 kids, it's probably going to be difficult for you to open a store. If you're a bachelor, it's probably going to be easier. Maybe the best situation is if you're married and you have no kids, because then you have a partner at least, and you don't have a bunch of additional mouths to feed beyond that one partner who's at least an adult and able to work and help and contribute. So how do you plan to keep eating when you open the store? And don't say, well, it'll just make money, because especially as businesses begin, just making money is not a given. You should expect that your business will struggle for a while. You need to make a list of everything you would need to buy to open the doors on the first day. And this kind of gets into a discussion of minimum viable product. What's the kind of smallest, stupidest card store you could open, and what would be required? Now, you don't have to be set up where you have 15 vending machines spitting out all the different packs of cards, so you never have to wait behind the counter. You don't have to have everything set up with a huge online presence with all of your inventory mimicked online through one inventory management system. You don't have to have all of that. Do you have tables, display cases, slat wall, maybe a rug for people to wipe the mud off their feet when they walk in? What's the basic dumbest way you could open a card store, but how much money would that cost? And one thing I started doing years ago was just keeping a giant list of everything I would need in a card store, but divided up into sections. Here's the minimum amount you would need to open a door on day one and at least service a customer. And then here's what you would need if you wanted to have kind of a nice store. And then here's what you would need, like how you would dream the business would be 5 years down the line in terms of services you offered, things you had, just, how do you imagine it, and what kind of physical things that you had to purchase would that require? And that will help you kind of get down to, okay, what do I need to begin with? How much money will a year's worth of inventory cost if you open at the start of a bear market? And the point of this is, imagine that, you get everything in order, you sign a lease, you do your build out, you move in, you open the door, and then TCGs all start crashing left and right, and all the prices get crushed. And now you've got to buy inventory for a year from distributors and sit on most of it. How much is that going to cost? How many games are you going to carry? Magic is trying to do 10 or 12 or 15 major releases a year. It feels like, I know 15 is a little facetious, but 10 is not. But how many of those are premium products where the boxes are very expensive? Are you going to support Pokemon? Well, they have 4 standard releases a year and typically 2 or sometimes 3 non-standard releases. They have booster boxes and booster bundles and ETBs and tins and V-boxes and collections and everything else. Are you going to have other inventory? All the peripheral kind of inventory you need to have, like binders and sleeves and, whatever stuff you would want to carry in your store, whether you think you would also veer into board games or toys or whatever else. So do you have enough cash to be able to survive a bear market that begins the day you open your door? Because you may not get lucky. Things look fine right now. The TCG market is doing fine right now, but, in 6 months or a year or 2 years or 5 years or at some point, we're going to get another bear market. Are you going to keep working another job at first? And do you have a transition plan? And, for me, yeah, I have a full-time career on top of running Final Trade. But like I said, Final Trade has been what most people would call a hobby business. And so I have plans for how I could open a store while still maintaining my full-time career. And I have plans where I could essentially retire from my full-time career and then open a store. And so you want to think of that spectrum and how various decisions will be made differently as you travel across that potential spectrum of how you'll transition into running the business. Now, there are people out there, obviously there are the people who pretend to have a store so they can get distributor access, but there are also people who have essentially shells of a store. They lease the cheapest, dumpiest retail space they can find. They have a couple folding tables in it, a display case, and they go there once or twice a week to get the mail. And essentially they still run everything else out of their house. And so that's an option if you don't actually want to service in-person customers, but you're trying to get the distributor access in order to build your online business. Some people do that. Some people also run card stores that are only open 2 or 3 or 4 days a week. They're not open 7 days a week. And so there's everything in between. And you have to think about what you would want to do, how you would do that to fit in with your financial situation and the rest of your life, your family situation, your career situation, and all of that. Would you be mostly focusing on online sales or in-store sales? And this is one that's really interesting. It comes down a lot to where you live. And if you watch Kevin from Gone Rogue Games on YouTube, he talks a lot about being in rural Utah. And the reality of him being in rural Utah seems to be that no matter what he did, the in-store presence is never going to be more than a certain level. I mean, there's no amount of work that guy could ever do to bring more than a certain number of sales and dollars in store every month. Where I'm in a different situation, there's a major university a few miles from my house, and the closest card store to it is further than my house is. And so I think there's a great opportunity to put a card store next to that university, and then you're basically less than a mile's walk from thousands and tens of thousands of the prime demographic for TCGs, which is young men 18 to early 20s. And hey, if their pockets are full of federal student loan money and they want to come buy Magic and Pokemon with it, all the better. And so I look at that as an opportunity if I ever opened a store that the in-store sales could be significant. They could be enough to matter. We'll put it that way, that I would not be completely beholden to fighting tooth and nail for the race to the bottom of the online market. How much of the new overhead for your store and cafe can the store itself cover? How much time will that require, and how much can you offload to an employee? And so the question there is, if you need a store so you can get the distributor access so you can expand an already existing online presence, that's one thing. If the store will be the primary means to sell the product itself, that's a separate thing. Both of them can be perfectly viable businesses, but you need to understand which one are you doing, or where on the spectrum in between them do you think it will lie. And, again, I see my situation with a large university nearby that does not have a card store catering it yet, that I could potentially open one, and I think I could easily cover the overhead expenses from the walk-in traffic, from the sales in store. And so that would then allow me to, I don't want to say it would be free to open a store, because boy, it wouldn't, but it would offset those costs, and then I could take the benefits of having direct distributor access and leverage that with my existing online business in order to expand the online business. So if you're in a situation where the store is basically going to bring in minimal sales, then you really have to think, am I going to be able to expand my online business by enough to compensate for the new overhead of a physical store? And is that going to work out? Let's see. Number 9, do you have an existing online presence in New Zealand to leverage? And, again, this is something where I've been playing the long game, and I've been very lucky. I've been running Final Trade on YouTube for 3.5 years now. I have over 100 patrons. I have a TCG Player account with 45,000 positive feedback and 2 negative feedback. And so, I've built that online presence so I can sell on TCG Player without getting ripped off. I have patrons where if one day I opened a store and suddenly my access to product was now better, it was now in some cases better prices because it was through direct distribution, and I could get stuff before release date, well, immediately I could market that to my 100 plus patrons. I could also put it out to my existing YouTube audience to try to get more people to sign up for Patreon to get those benefits also. I can also dovetail all the stuff that I would do in the store into more YouTube content to increase the YouTube revenue. And so having an existing online presence really helps. And I think there have been a lot of stores in the last, say, 3 or 4 years who thought, hey, we'll just get into the Patreon game and the direct distribution model, but they had no online presence. They had no, I'll say they had no personality, because there was no person making videos and being personable online to create a relationship between the buyer and the seller. And so that's a difference that I have. Do you have that? Have you built that? Can you build that? Do you have the personality where you'll get in front of a camera and talk on YouTube and make 700 videos and answer people's questions and have discussions with patrons and all of those other things? Because that's a huge thing to be able to leverage if you're talking about opening a physical store / cafe. Let's see. Number 10, do you have existing relationships in the industry? And this starts all the way from, the basic stupid stuff. Like here in the US with TCG Player, they have their Infinite service. And if you're a member of it for a year, you get 3% off of everything. Well, that's very valuable. I mean, that pays for itself again and again and again in this industry. Do you have other stupid examples? Do you have a 3% PayPal credit card? Because that gets you all your postage and all your stamps 3% off. You'll spend thousands and thousands of dollars a year on postage, and 3% off of that helps a lot. Do you have an Amazon Prime business account? So you get 5% off every time Watsy dumps product on Amazon. You can also take the slow shipping options on Amazon to get another 2% off. So those are kind of the dumb end of the spectrum of, do you have relationships? The other end of the spectrum is, have you met people? I have local and national and international connections with people that I've made through YouTube and through Patreon that help me get product at preferential prices. And so having made those business relationships and established them and built trust in them and a history, I can then expand them in the future if I have the opportunity given to me by having a physical store. You can not only use those relationships to help with the store, but the store can help benefit those relationships. Again, like I always talk about, it's about building an ecosystem. Final Trade and your business are both ecosystems. You build them through yourself, through your relationships, your customers, your platforms, your suppliers, your inventory, your product. Everything is part of that ecosystem that you're building. And the more of it you have, the more valuable every node and every connection become. And so how many of those do you already have? How do you think the situation will change the next time the TCG market goes into an irrationally exuberant bull market or a terrible bear market? How vulnerable is the New Zealand TCG market? And, one of the things I'll circle back to something I was talking about earlier was, if you're to some degree thinking, I'll find a way to get product from the US shipped economically to New Zealand, and then I'll arbitrage that product into the New Zealand retail market. What happens the next time in the US every person is buying every box set, every price, and people are once again pulling guns on each other in Target to get Pokemon cards like they did in 2021? So, how will that affect your ability to potentially get product out of North America, out of Japan, out of Australia, or wherever else you might be getting it internationally? How will it also affect your ability to get it from distribution in New Zealand? And the same side of that with bear markets. If a bear market comes and the product is super cheap, but you can't move it, how's that going to affect your business? And the last question, what else do you bring that you can leverage, just in general? And I'll give you some examples from me. I've been an engineer. I've done data analysis for 20 years as an engineer. So I'm really good at math. I'm really good with simulation, with numbers, with building math models. And that helps more with the TCG investing kind of thing and, figuring out EVs of boxes and stuff like that. So that's useful to me. Also, I can repair anything. I do for my entire adult life. I've done all my car repairs, all my home repairs, all my plumbing, all my electrical. I fix all my kids' toys. Basically anything that can be repaired with commercially available spare parts, I repair myself. And that's a good skill to have when you own a business and you may need to just repair something instead of calling a handyman, paying a service fee to get them to come out, and then paying them $150 an hour labor to fix something for you. So, what kind of other skills do you bring that you can leverage in your business in general? And so I'll have another word here about the cafe part of the business. And I guess two words about it. One is restaurants are difficult and cafes are difficult. They are notoriously brutal businesses with low margins. And I'm going to read between the lines and think what you're really trying to do at the cafe is just have small selection of food and drinks just to keep people's blood sugar up so they don't leave the store, so they potentially spend more money. And I've thought about that a lot myself with potentially opening a card store. Some of the things I would do is I'd have a drink vending machine. I'd have a snack vending machine because I don't want to have to spend time ringing up every one of those purchases. I want it to be a vending machine that's over on the side of the store where people are playing at tables so they can get up and impulse purchase items. You need to also be aware of the regulations surrounding what kind of food you can serve and cleanliness standards and all of that stuff, because man, I've looked into that briefly for some ideas I've had about what kind of food you could sell at a card store. And here in Texas, we got a law passed several years ago that's called something like the craft kitchen something law. And basically what it is that as long as your food is shelf stable, you can cook it at home and sell it in a business. And it's a little more complicated than that. And there are a few stipulations surrounding allergies and things like that. But if it's shelf stable, then say I could have my wife bake a pie and then I could sell the pie, or I could sell pieces of pie, or I could sell cookies, or, brownies, or anything that my wife is great at baking. I could sell, but I can't sell cheesecake because it's not shelf stable. I can't sell homemade ice cream. Not that, there's too much labor involved in making homemade ice cream. You could never sell that profitably, worth your time. But, I can't do my own ice cream, but I could buy a freezer and I could sell Bluebell brand ice cream in store. And so, but I would not be allowed to operate a soft serve ice cream machine. And so when it comes to this cafe part of your business, really think a lot about what you want to serve. What items would be essential to the type of cafe you're looking at having along with your card store, and understand where are the break points in all these different types of items where the amount of regulation and oversight from the government gets more and more burdensome. And so you can anticipate that, so that you're not in a situation where all of a sudden, you have a carafe of milk for people to pour in their coffee, and that carafe of milk means that now somebody has to come inspect your business every month, and you have potential surprise inspections where they make sure the milk's at the right temperature and all this stuff. And maybe you have to be registered for that. Maybe your employees have to take classes from the government in order to be certified to pour the milk into the carafe. So just be aware of those kind of things, because, man, the rabbit hole for food service companies is very, very, very deep. And that's all in addition to a card store in general. Now, people will talk about opening a card store is stupid, and, it's a hopeless business and stuff. And I think most of that is because most of the people who do it because they love cards. And then they think, I'm going to open a card store. And they don't have the business acumen. They don't have the access to capital. And so when something bad happens, like murders of Karlov Manor, and the collector boxes fall to $135 the week of release, they have to panic sell because they need the money back, because they've got to do pre-orders of Outlaws already. And that's poor capitalization. And I think that's what really sinks a lot of card stores, is the capitalization issue. If you had, say you were independently wealthy and you could afford to sink an additional $10,000 a month into inventory, you would never have to worry about those problems. You could simply buy the next product, and if it crashes, you sit on it for 6 months, a year, 2 years, 5 years until it comes back. And those are obviously far opposite ends of the spectrum. And, maybe if you have the kind of independent wealth where you can sink $10,000 extra a month into something, you should just start taking cruises all the time and not worry about running a business. But my point is, a lot of the issues of poor management of card stores, I think, come down to capitalization and the ability to manage your capital, but to have enough to where you don't have to panic sell at a loss. You can just cross your arms and sit on it for a while and then sell it once it comes back, or, a little while after it comes back, and you can make a little extra money. So I think that's one of the big differentiators. So let me know what you think, Tim. Ask me more questions. Go off and contemplate these things, and send me some follow-up questions on Patreon, and let me know what you're doing. So if anybody's got any advice other than the smug nonsense of never open a card store, put it down below, and let's see what you have. So thanks to everyone who makes this content possible, especially my very generous supporters on Patreon. Like, comment, share, and subscribe, and join me on Final Trade.